We're told that family is everything, that blood runs thicker than water, that those who share your name will guard your heart like treasure. The fairy tales promise us that even when the world turns cruel, home remains sacred. But here's the shattering reality they don't whisper in children's ears. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes wrapped in familiar hands. Sometimes the monster who destroys you shares your last name, sits at your dinner table, and counts coins while your childhood bleeds out on cold stone floors. I learned this truth at 8 years old, in a marketplace that smelled of rotting vegetables and desperate dreams, when my uncle's palm closed around 30 pieces of silver, and his eyes never once met mine. They say you can't remember pain from childhood, that the mind mercifully blurs the edges of early trauma into soft, manageable shadows. They're wrong. I remember every detail. The way the morning frost clung to the cobblestones, the merchant's tobacco-stained fingers as he examined my teeth like I was livestock. The sound my uncle made when he counted the coins, a small, satisfied grunt that told me exactly how much my life was worth. Less than a month's rent. Less than his gambling debts. Less than nothing. But this isn't a story about how I was broken. You've heard that story 1,000 times, the innocent child, the cruel world, the descent into darkness. No, this is about something far more dangerous. What happens when the broken learn to forge themselves into blades? When the sold become the sovereign, when the girl who was worth 30 pieces of silver returns as the woman who could buy and sell kingdoms. This is about the price of betrayal, and how compound interest works on vengeance. This is about power, and blood, and the particular kind of justice that only comes when the prey learns to hunt. Chapter 1: The Weight of Silver. The morning my childhood ended, the sky was the color of old bruises. I stood in the central marketplace of Grey Hollow, my hand clutched in my Uncle Silas's calloused grip, watching merchants arrange their wares under canvas canopies that snapped in the bitter wind. At 8 years old, I didn't yet understand the weight of the silence between us. I only knew that Uncle Silas had woken me before dawn, told me to dress in my cleanest clothes, and promised we were going somewhere special. I'd believed him. Children are exquisitely designed for belief. "Stay close, Revna," he muttered, pulling me through the growing crowd. His eyes darted from stall to stall, hunting for something I couldn't name. "And keep your mouth shut. Don't speak unless spoken to." I nodded, my stomach tight with unnamed anxiety. Uncle Silas had taken me in 6 months ago, after the fever took my mother. He wasn't cruel, not exactly. He simply looked at me, the way one might look at broken furniture. Something inherited, burdensome, requiring disposal. My father had disappeared years before I could remember his face. In our world, human men who coupled with shifter women rarely stayed. The shame of producing a human child, a dud, as they called us, was too much for most bloodlines to bear. My mother had loved him anyway, she'd told me once. Love was her particular foolishness. It became mine too, in the end. We stopped at a stall near the eastern edge of the market, where the legitimate merchants gave way to shadier transactions. A man stood there, thick-necked and heavy-jowled, smoking a pipe that filled the air with sweet, cloying smoke. His eyes were small and clever, set deep in a face that had seen every variety of human desperation. "Silas," the man said, his voice like gravel grinding against gravel. "You're late." Had to make sure she was presentable. Uncle Silas's hand tightened on my shoulder, pushing me forward. "Here she is, just like I said." The merchant's gaze slid over me with the same attention he might give a bolt of fabric. He circled slowly, and I felt my skin crawl under the assessment. He gripped my chin, turning my face left and right, checked my teeth, squeezed my upper arm to test the muscle. "She's small," he said. "She's 8. She'll grow." Human? Pure human. Mother was shifter, but the girl's got no wolf in her. Not a drop. Uncle Silas said this with a particular emphasis, the way you might describe an object as thoroughly broken. But she's healthy, strong, good with her hands. Literate. Too, her mother wasted time on books. The merchant grunted. Literate humans don't last long in the textile mills. They think too much, get ideas. Then don't send her to a mill. Uncle Silas's voice had taken on a wheedling tone. "I'm not asking top price. I need quicksilver. You find a household that needs domestic help. You've got yourself a profitable margin." I finally understood. The realization didn't crash over me like a wave. It crept in like cold water rising, inch by terrible inch, until I was drowning in it. My uncle was selling me. I was the merchandise being appraised. The somewhere special was a human trafficking stall. Uncle Silas? My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. Quiet, he snapped. The merchant pulled the pipe from his mouth. She's going to cry. I hate it when they cry. She won't cry. Uncle Silas bent down, his face level with mine. For just a moment I thought I saw something like regret flicker in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by flat pragmatism. Listen to me, Revna. This is how the world works. Your mother didn't prepare you for it, she filled your head with stories and nonsense. But I'm being kind, really. I'm finding you a place. You'll work, you'll eat, you'll have a roof. That's more than most human girls get. I could work for you, I whispered. I could help at the shop. I can't afford you. He said it simply, like stating the weather. I've got gambling debts. The pack enforcers are asking questions. If I don't pay what I owe, they'll take the shop. They'll take everything, you understand? You're not my daughter. You're not my responsibility. I kept you as long as I could, but that's done now. The merchant cleared his throat. Touching. Are we doing this or not? Uncle Silas straightened. How much? 30 silver marks. That's robbery. She's worth twice that. Then take her to someone else. The merchant turned away, already dismissing us. Wait. Uncle Silas's hand was shaking now. I could feel it trembling against my shoulder. 30. Fine. 30. The merchant counted out the coins with theatrical slowness, stacking them in a small pile on his stall's counter. The morning light caught the silver, making it gleam like captured stars. My price. My value. The sum total of everything I'd meant to the last family I had. Uncle Silas released my shoulder to count the coins. I stood there, suddenly untethered, watching his fingers move through the silver with an efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. Maybe not with children, but with things he valued equally little. Pleasure doing business, the merchant said. He pulled a length of thin rope from beneath his counter. Give me your wrists, girl. I looked at Uncle Silas. Really looked at him, searching for anything. Shame. Hesitation. Second thoughts. He was already pocketing the silver. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Uncle Silas, I said one more time. Not pleading, just testing. Seeing if my voice could reach whatever piece of him might still be human. He turned and walked away. I watched his back disappear into the marketplace crowd, his shoulders hunched against the wind, his hand protective over the pocket that held his 30 silver marks. He never looked back. Not once. The merchant grabbed my wrists. Don't fight, he said, not unkindly. It'll only hurt more. I didn't fight. I'd already learned the first lesson that would define the next decade of my life. Fighting costs energy, and energy is the only currency that matters when you have nothing else. So I stood still while he bound my wrists. I stayed quiet when he led me to a cart filled with 3 other children, their eyes hollow with the same new understanding. I didn't cry when he threw a canvas tarp over us and the world went dark. I just memorized the weight of 30 silver marks. Someday, I promised myself in that darkness, I would make my uncle understand exactly what he'd purchased with that silver. Not my life. His death. Chapter 2. The Northern Roads. The journey north took 6 days. I learned later that we were being transported to the Iron Peak territories, the northernmost region of the continent, where the mountains grew teeth and the winters could kill you in your sleep. It was shifter country, dominated by the wolf packs that had claimed the highlands 3 generations ago. Humans existed there the way moss exists on stone, clinging to the edges, useful for filling cracks, entirely disposable. The merchant, whose name I never learned, didn't speak to us much during the journey. He fed us twice a day, thin, gruel, and hard bread, and let us relieve ourselves at dawn and dusk, under the watchful eye of his assistant, a silent woman with a face like weathered leather. The other children in the cart varied in age from perhaps 6 to 12. None of us spoke. What was there to say? On the 3rd night, one of the younger boys tried to escape. I woke to the sound of running feet and shouting. The merchant's assistant dragged the boy back within minutes. I watched through the gap in the canvas as the merchant beat him methodically, not with rage but with the tired efficiency of someone performing a familiar chore. The boy's screams eventually faded to whimpers. Then silence. "Let that be a lesson," the merchant called out to the rest of us. "North or south, mountain or sea, there's nowhere for human children to run. The packs will find you. They always do. Your scent marks you. Your weakness defines you. The only choice you have is between hard work and harder punishment." He left the boy in the cart with us, bloody and semi-conscious. I tore a strip from my already tattered dress and tried to clean his wounds with water from my rationed cup. He was perhaps 7 years old. His eyes, when they focused on me, held no gratitude, just emptiness. He died on the 4th day. The merchant didn't seem particularly bothered. He wrapped the small body in canvas and left it by the roadside. "The wolves will handle it," he said. "Circle of life and all that." Then he climbed back onto his cart and urged the horses forward. That night, I made my second promise. I would survive. Whatever it took. Whoever I had to become. I would not end up as a canvas-wrapped bundle feeding wolves by the roadside. Survival wasn't noble or pretty. But it was the only revenge available to me. We reached Iron Peak City on the evening of the 6th day. Even through my exhaustion and hunger, I felt the weight of the place. The city sprawled across the valley like a sleeping giant. All dark stone and iron gates, with the palace rising from the center like a crown of obsidian spears. Smoke from 1,000 chimneys turned the sunset into something bruised and violent. Everything here was harder, sharper, colder than Grey Hollow. This was a place built by predators. For predators, we humans were just the livestock. The merchant led us through narrow streets that grew progressively dirtier, past rows of cramped buildings where human workers lived in conditions that would shame a stable. We attracted no attention. Bound children being led through the streets were apparently unremarkable in Iron Peak. We stopped finally at a large warehouse near the eastern wall. The merchant's assistant knocked in a specific pattern, and the door opened to reveal a tall, thin woman with silver shot through her dark hair and eyes that calculated value the way butchers calculate meat. "Sienna," the merchant said with a familiarity that suggested frequent business. "I've got a mixed lot this time. 3 for the mills, 1 for domestic service." Sienna's gaze swept over us. Ages 6 to 12, all human, all healthy except, he gestured vaguely at a girl with a twisted foot. "That one's half price. I'll take the 3 for the mills at standard rates. The domestic one, let me see her." The merchant yanked me forward. I stumbled, my bound wrists throwing off my balance, but I managed to stay upright. Sienna circled me just as the merchant had done, but her assessment felt different, more thorough. She was looking for something specific. How old? 8. Literate? So I'm told. Sienna gripped my chin, forcing me to meet her eyes. Hers were pale gray, the color of winter ice. "Can you read, girl?" I nodded. "Speak. I asked you a question." "Yes." My voice came out rusty from days of disuse. "I can read. Numbers too?" "Yes." "Useful." She released my chin. "I'll take her. But not for domestic service." The merchant frowned. "She's small for mill work." "Not the mills." Sienna smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "I have a special placement for her. Someone who needs a particular type of assistance." The merchant's eyes lit with interest. "The Blood Countess? She prefers Scholar Meredith, but yes. The old woman's been asking for a human child who can read. Something about organizing her research. I've sent her 3 already. But they keep running away or breaking down. This one." She looked at me again, and I saw calculation sharpen in her gaze. "This one has survivor's eyes. She might last." They haggled over price. I stopped listening. My mind was too busy processing the words Blood Countess and trying to understand what fresh nightmare awaited me. Scholar Meredith. Research. Children who ran away or broke down. Nothing about that suggested anything good. Sienna purchased me for 40 silver marks, 10 more than Uncle Silas had sold me for. I found bitter satisfaction in that. Even in this terrible economy, I'd appreciate it in value. The merchant left with the other children. I watched them go, these small strangers who'd shared my cart and my horror. and wondered if I'd ever see another human child again. Probably not. The mills ate workers like kindling. They'd be bones before winter. Sienna cut the ropes binding my wrists. Follow me. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch anything. Don't look anyone in the eye. Am I clear? Yes. She led me deeper into the warehouse, which I realized was actually a processing center for human labor. Dozens of people, mostly adults, some teenagers sat on benches or stood in lines, being sorted and assigned by other handlers like Sienna. No one looked at me. No one looked at anything. Their eyes were dead in a way that suggested they'd survived by excising hope entirely. I would not become that, I promised myself. I would not hollow out. We climbed a staircase to a second floor, then a third. Sienna moved with quick efficiency, her heels clicking against worn wood. Finally, we reached a small office where she produced a leather-bound ledger and a pen. Name. Revna. Family name? Doesn't matter. I said it flatly. I don't have family. Something flickered in Sienna's expression. Not sympathy, exactly, but perhaps recognition. Smart girl. Family names are chains in this world. Better to be no one than to be owned by blood. She wrote something in her ledger. You belong to House Thornwick now. Specifically, to Scholar Meredith Thornwick. She's old, she's strange, and she has very particular requirements. You'll live in her tower. You'll organize her books, transcribe her notes, and run errands. You'll eat one meal a day. You'll sleep when she allows it. You'll never speak of her work to anyone. If you try to run, the enforcers will find you and return you minus a hand. If you prove useless, she'll send you to the mills. If you prove valuable, you might survive until adulthood. Questions. I had 1,000 questions, but I asked the only one that mattered. What kind of research does she do? Sienna's smile returned, cold and knowing. The kind that keeps little girls awake at night. The kind that makes grown men weep. The kind that might actually matter in this broken world. She closed the ledger with a snap. Welcome to your new life, Revna. Try not to disappoint her. The last 3 girls did, and I hear their screams still echo in the tower sometimes. She said it casually, like mentioning the weather. I felt ice crystallize in my stomach, but I kept my face blank. I'd already learned. Showing fear is showing weakness. Showing weakness is inviting predators. And in this city of wolves, there were predators everywhere. When do I start? I asked. Sienna studied me for a long moment. Now, she finally said, the scholar doesn't sleep much. She'll be expecting you. She led me out of the office and through a series of corridors that connected the warehouse to other buildings. Iron Peak was built like a warren, all interconnected structures and hidden passages. Designed, I realized, so that humans could be moved without being seen. We were the infrastructure, the invisible machinery that kept the city running. Eventually, we emerged into open air, a small courtyard surrounded by high walls. On the far side stood a tower, narrow and dark, rising 6 stories into the smoke-stained sky. No lights showed in its windows. It looked less like a place of learning and more like a place where hope went to die. That's the Scholar's Tower, Sienna said. She owns the entire building. No one else is allowed inside except you and whoever she summons. The door locks from the inside. If she doesn't let you out, no one will hear you scream. She pulled a key from her pocket and handed it to me. But she likes readers. And she's been lonely since the last girl threw herself from the roof 3 months ago. So maybe you'll get lucky. I took the key. My hand didn't shake. I wouldn't let it. One more thing, Sienna said, as I started toward the tower. The scholar isn't just anyone. She's blood-bound to the Alpha King himself, sister to his father. Whatever she's doing in that tower, it has royal protection, which means no one will save you if things go wrong. But it also means if she takes a liking to you, you might end up with more power than any human child has a right to dream of. The Alpha King, the ruler of all wolf territories, the most dangerous shifter alive, and I was being sent to work for his aunt. I looked up at the dark tower and made my 3rd promise. I would learn everything this Scholar Meredith had to teach. I would absorb her knowledge like a sponge absorbs blood, and someday, somehow, I would use that knowledge to become something more than a child sold for 30 silver marks. I would become dangerous. I walked across the courtyard alone, my thin dress offering no protection against the evening wind. The tower door opened at the turn of my key with a groan that sounded like a throat being slit. Darkness waited inside, absolute and hungry. I stepped through the door. Behind me, I heard Sienna laugh softly. Then the courtyard gate clanged shut, and I was alone with whatever horrors the Blood Countess Scholar Meredith Thornwick had waiting in the dark. The door closed behind me, with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid. Welcome home, something whispered in the shadows. I'd survive this. I'd survive everything, and then I'd make them all pay. Chapter 3. The Scholar's Gift. The tower's interior smelled of old paper, dried herbs, and something else, something metallic and sharp that made my nose wrinkle. Blood, I realized. Old blood, soaked into wood and stone over years, maybe decades. I stood in the entrance hall, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. Slowly, shapes emerged, a narrow staircase spiraling upward, walls lined with shelves crammed with books and glass jars containing things I couldn't identify in the gloom. Moonlight filtered through a high window, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Close the door behind you, child. The voice came from above, female. Aged, but strong. Not frail. Commanding. I pushed the heavy door shut. The lock clicked automatically, sealing me inside. Now climb. All the way to the top. Don't stop. Don't touch anything. Don't waste my time being frightened. I found the staircase and began to climb. Each floor I passed revealed more of the scholar's world. One level devoted entirely to books, another to laboratory equipment that gleamed with sinister purpose, another to what looked like medical instruments laid out with surgical precision. Everywhere, there were jars, hundreds of them, containing preserved specimens. Hearts, eyes, things I couldn't name, things I didn't want to name. By the time I reached the 6th floor, my legs burned, and my breath came in short gasps. A single door stood open, firelight spilling from within. Enter. The room was part laboratory, part library, part living space. Books covered every available surface, stacked in towers that defied gravity. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across tables laden with open texts, surgical tools, and sketches of anatomical diagrams that made my stomach clench. In the center of this controlled chaos sat a woman. Scholar Meredith Thornwick was perhaps 70, her face a landscape of deep lines and sharp angles. Her hair, pure white, hung in a long braid over one shoulder. But it was her eyes that captured attention, pale amber, wolf eyes, burning with an intelligence that felt like it could peel back skin and examine the soul beneath. She studied me with the same intensity I'd seen in The Merchant and Sienna, but this was different. She wasn't calculating my worth. She was calculating my potential. You're smaller than the others, she said finally. Younger too. 8? Yes, scholar. Can you read? Yes, scholar. Prove it. She gestured to the nearest table, where a book lay open. Read that passage aloud. I approached carefully, mindful of her warning not to touch anything unnecessarily. The book was old, its pages yellowed and fragile. The text was in the common tongue, but the vocabulary was advanced medical terminology mixed with philosophical discourse. I read, "The fundamental question is not whether the soul resides in the heart or the mind, but whether it exists as a discrete entity at all. If consciousness arises from the physical structure of the brain, then the shifter ability to transform suggests either a miraculous preservation of neural architecture across forms, or something far more troubling, that identity itself is fluid, mutable, and perhaps entirely illusory." I stumbled over a few words, but I made it through. Meredith's eyebrows rose. "You understand what you just read? Some of it, it's asking if shifters keep their minds when they change shape, or if they become something different." Close enough. She stood, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body had begun to betray them but whose will remained iron. The last 3 girls they sent me couldn't read past a 3rd-level primer. They were useless. I sent one to the mills, one to domestic service, and one. She paused, something dark crossing her expression. One couldn't handle what she saw here. She made a choice. Do you know what choice I'm referring to? She jumped from the roof, I said quietly. She did. Weak-minded. Broken by the first real truth she encountered. Meredith moved closer, and I caught the scent of her herbs and chemicals, and underneath, the wild musk of wolf. Are you weak-minded, Revna? No, scholar. We'll see. She circled me slowly. I'm going to tell you what you'll do here, and you'll have one chance to leave. After tonight, that door locks and you belong to this tower until I'm finished with you. Understood? Yes, scholar. I am conducting research that the Alpha King himself has sanctioned. Research into the nature of shifter genetics, the mechanism of transformation, and the reason why some bloodlines produce human offspring, while others remain pure. I am trying to answer the question that text poses. What happens to consciousness during the shift? Where does the human end and the wolf begin? And most importantly, her eyes locked onto mine with fierce intensity. Can the curse be broken? Can humans be made into shifters? The implications hit me like a physical blow. If humans could become shifters, that would change everything, I whispered. Yes. Meredith smiled, and it was the first genuine expression I'd seen on any adult's face since my mother died. You understand. Good. You'll be my assistant. You'll organize my research, transcribe my notes, help with my experiments, and learn everything I have to teach you. In exchange, you'll eat 3 meals a day, sleep in a real bed, and receive an education that most noble children would kill for. You'll also see things that will haunt your dreams. You'll participate in work that many would call monstrous. And you'll keep every secret you learn here, or I'll kill you myself. Slowly, do you accept these terms? I should have been terrified. Any sane child would have begged for the mills instead. But I wasn't thinking about sanity. I was thinking about power. If I learned what Meredith knew, if I understood the science of shifter genetics, I would possess knowledge that could shake kingdoms. I would be valuable in a way that transcended my humanity. I would be dangerous. I accept, I said. Meredith studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. We begin tomorrow. Tonight, you eat, bathe, and sleep. Through that door. She pointed to a small doorway I hadn't noticed. Is your room. Simple but clean. There's a bathhouse on the 4th floor. Don't break anything. Questions. Just one, scholar. Speak. Why do you care? About making humans into shifters. You're already a wolf. What does it matter to you? For the first time, something like pain flickered across Meredith's face. Because I've lived long enough to see what this world does to those it deems worthless. Because I had a daughter once, born human in a shifter body, and I watched them tear her apart for it. Because if there's a way to level this cursed hierarchy, I'll find it or die trying. She turned away, dismissing me. Now go. You'll need your strength. I found my room barely larger than a closet, but it had a bed, a blanket, and a small window. After 6 days in a cart, and 8 years of existing at the mercy of others, it felt like a palace. On the bed lay a tray of food, bread, cheese, dried meat, and an apple. More food than I'd seen in days. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, and made my 4th promise. I would learn everything Meredith Thornwick had to teach. I would become indispensable, and somehow, I would use this knowledge to become something this world had never seen before. A human who couldn't be sold. A human who couldn't be dismissed. A human who could make wolves bow. The next 10 years passed in a blur of books and blood. Meredith was a demanding teacher, but she was a teacher nonetheless. She didn't just use me as manual labor, she educated me with a rigor that would have impressed any university. I learned anatomy, biology, chemistry, and the complex magical theory that underpinned shifter transformations. I learned to read 3 languages, to perform surgical procedures on cadavers, to document research with scientific precision. I also learned the darker truths. Meredith's research required test subjects. Sometimes they were volunteers, desperate humans hoping to become wolves. More often they were prisoners, criminals, or simply the unwanted refuse of shifter society. I assisted with procedures that would have made hardened soldiers vomit. I watched transformations go wrong in ways that turned my stomach to acid. I learned that progress is built on corpses, and mercy is a luxury that science cannot afford. But I survived. More than that, I excelled. By 14, I was conducting basic experiments on my own. By 16, I was developing theories that made Meredith's eyes light with excitement. By 18, I had become something unprecedented. A human scholar in a shifter world, possessing knowledge that made me valuable even to the wolves who sneered at my lack of transformation. Meredith aged during those years. The fire in her eyes remained, but her body grew frail, her movements slower. She refused to acknowledge her mortality, working through pain and exhaustion with the stubbornness of someone who knew her time was running short. "You're not finished," I told her one evening when I was 17. She'd collapsed over her desk, too weak to continue transcribing. "No," she agreed, her voice thin. "But you will be." "What do you mean?" She looked at me with those wolf eyes, now clouded with age. "All my research, all my notes, all my theories, they're yours now. You're the only one who understands the work. The only one who can continue it. Promise me, Revna. Promise me you'll finish what I started." "I promise," I said without hesitation. She died 6 months later, in her sleep, her hand still clutching a pen. I found her in the morning and felt nothing. No grief. No relief. Just the cold understanding that I was alone again. But this time I was armed with knowledge that made me powerful. The tower became mine. Meredith had arranged it in her will, a document that shocked the legal authorities but which the Alpha King himself had countersigned years ago. A human couldn't inherit property, they argued. But this human could, because she possessed something the crown valued: the accumulated research of the kingdom's greatest scientific mind. I was 18 years old, legally free, and possessed of knowledge that made me dangerous. And then, one winter morning, everything changed. A messenger arrived at my tower with a summons sealed with the royal crest. The Alpha King requested my presence. Immediately. Chapter 4. The Beast in the Throne Room. The royal palace was a monument to predator supremacy. I walked through its corridors flanked by 2 stone-faced guards, my worn boots clicking against marble floors inlaid with gold. Everywhere I looked, I saw wealth that could feed Greyhollow for a decade. Tapestries depicting wolf hunts, sculptures of famous alpha warriors, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the light and threw it back like captured stars. I'd spent 10 years in a tower, learning to dissect the mechanism of shifter power. Now, I was walking into its beating heart. The guards stopped before massive double doors carved with scenes of wolves bringing down prey. One knocked 3 sharp raps that echoed like gunshots. "Enter," came a voice from within. Deep. Commanding. Wrapped in the kind of authority that doesn't ask, it takes. The doors swung open. The throne room was cavernous, designed to make visitors feel small. Columns rose like stone trees, their capitals carved into snarling wolf heads. The ceiling disappeared into shadow, and at the far end, elevated on a dais of black marble, sat the throne itself, not ornate, but brutal. Functional. A seat of power, not beauty. On it sat the Alpha King. I'd heard descriptions of Damien Thornwick my entire life. The Bloodless King, they called him, because he'd taken the throne at 19 by challenging his father and killing him without spilling a drop of blood, just a perfectly placed strike that stopped the heart. The Wolfborn, because his transformation was said to be so complete that no trace of humanity remained when he shifted. The Merciless, because his justice was swift, absolute, and terrifying. But no description had prepared me for the reality of him. He was perhaps 30 now, though age was difficult to gauge in shifters. He sat with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to rule. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, partially obscuring a face that was all hard angles and sharp edges, handsome the way a knife is handsome, beautiful in its capacity for damage. His eyes were amber, like Meredith's had been, but where hers had burned with intellectual fire, his burned with something closer to barely leashed violence. He wore simple black, no crown, no ornamentation. He didn't need it. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Revna," he said. And my name in his mouth sounded like both acknowledgement and threat. Meredith's human. I bowed, not too deep, not too shallow. Meredith had taught me that showing too much deference invited contempt, but showing too little invited punishment. "Your Majesty, you may rise." I straightened and found him studying me with the same intensity Meredith had shown during our first meeting. But where she'd been looking for potential, he was looking for weakness, calculating, assessing whether I was useful or disposable. "My aunt spoke highly of you in her final letters," he continued, said you had a mind sharper than most of my advisors, that you understood her research better than she did in some areas, that you were the only one capable of continuing her work. Scholar Meredith was generous in her assessment. She was never generous. She was precise. He stood, and I fought the urge to step back, even without shifting. His presence was overwhelming. He descended the dais with predatory grace, which means if she said you were valuable, you are. The question is, valuable enough to keep alive? The threat hung in the air between us, crystal clear. I possess 10 years of research that no one else has seen, I said, keeping my voice steady. Scholar Meredith's notes are written in a cipher that only I can decode. Her experiments are documented in a format that requires understanding both the scientific method and the theoretical framework she developed. Without me, everything she learned dies with her. Then perhaps I should simply take what you know. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. There are ways to extract information from unwilling subjects. Painful ways, thorough ways. You could. I refused to look away. But knowledge tortured from someone is knowledge corrupted. You'd get fragments, not understanding. Data, not insight. Scholar Meredith spent 50 years on this research. Do you really want to trust the extraction to someone who'll have me screaming within an hour? Something flickered in his expression: amusement, maybe, or respect. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, I corrected. But I've spent 10 years in a tower full of horrors learning to think through my fear. It's the only reason I'm still alive. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that held no humor. Meredith trained you well. She always did prefer students who bit back. He turned away, pacing toward the windows that overlooked the city. Here's your situation, Revna. My aunt's research is crucial to the stability of this kingdom. The pure-blood families are growing restless. They see human-born children as weakness, contamination of the bloodline. There have been 3 assassination attempts on mixed families in the last year alone. If I can't find a way to either prevent human births or transform humans into shifters, we're heading toward civil war. I absorbed this, my mind racing. This was bigger than I'd understood. Not just scientific curiosity, political survival. How much time do I have? I asked. To complete the research? He glanced back at me. 5 years, maybe less. The extremists are getting bolder. They want a purity law, mandatory execution of all human-born children from shifter parents. If I can't offer an alternative solution. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. And if I succeed? If I find the answer? Then you'll have done something unprecedented. You'll have saved thousands of lives and prevented a war. And I'll give you whatever you want in return. He said it casually, but I heard the weight behind the words. A promise from the Alpha King was binding, enforced by magic older than the kingdom itself. Anything? I pressed. His eyes narrowed. Dangerous question from a human with nothing. Not nothing. I have knowledge, which means I have leverage. I took a breath, gambling everything on this moment. I want full autonomy over the research. No interference, no oversight. I want funding for equipment and materials. I want legal protection. No one touches me or the tower without your explicit permission. And I want a promise. When I'm finished, win or fail, I walk away free. No ownership, no servitude, no debt. You're negotiating with me? He sounded incredulous. Yes. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then that dangerous smile returned. Meredith chose well. Fine, you have your terms. But understand this, Revna, if you fail, those same terms work against you. No interference means no one stops me when I decide you're no longer useful. No oversight means no one sees what happens in that tower. And if you walk away free, it will be because you've earned it by delivering results, not before. Understood. He extended his hand. We have an accord. I hesitated. In shifter culture, a handshake wasn't just agreement. It was a binding contract, enforced by alpha dominance. If I touched him, I'd feel the full weight of his power, the suffocating pressure of his authority. It would hurt, but it would also make the contract unbreakable. I gripped his hand. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. It felt like touching lightning, like every nerve in my body igniting at once. His alpha dominance crashed over me like a wave, trying to force me to my knees, to submit, to acknowledge my place as prey before predator. I felt my legs shaking, my vision blurring, but I didn't let go. And I didn't bow. I stared into those amber eyes and thought about 30 silver marks, about a tower full of corpses, about 10 years of surviving in a world that wanted me dead. I thought about every indignity, every dismissal, every moment I'd been treated as less than human, and I held on. When he finally released my hand, I stumbled but stayed upright. My palm was red, already bruising. It would hurt for days. Interesting, he murmured. Most humans collapse after 5 seconds of that. You lasted nearly 30. I've had practice enduring pain, I said through gritted teeth. Clearly. He turned back toward his throne. You're dismissed. My steward will arrange for funding and materials. I expect monthly progress reports. And Revna? He glanced back over his shoulder. Don't disappoint me. I'm not as patient as my aunt was. I bowed and turned to leave, my hand throbbing, my heart hammering. One more thing, he called when I reached the door. I stopped. Welcome to the game, little human. Try not to die too quickly. It's been a long time since anyone entertained me this much. I returned to my tower with my mind spinning and my hand aching. The accord with the Alpha King changed everything. I had resources now, protection, purpose. But I also had a deadline and the weight of thousands of lives resting on my success. That night, I spread Meredith's final notes across my desk and began to read with fresh urgency. She'd been close to something, a breakthrough she'd hinted at in her last months but never fully explained. Something about the relationship between shifter magic and human consciousness, about barriers that could be broken if approached from the right angle. I worked through the night, and the next night, and the one after that. Days blurred into weeks. I barely ate, barely slept, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and survival instinct. And slowly, impossibly, I began to see what Meredith had seen. The answer wasn't in forcing the transformation. It was in understanding why humans resisted it. Every shifter possessed a genetic marker, a specific sequence that allowed their cells to restructure during transformation. Humans born to shifter parents lacked this marker, but they had something else, a genetic mutation that prevented magical integration. It wasn't absence, it was active resistance, which meant if I could suppress the resistance, the magic might flow naturally. I began designing experiments, carefully documenting each step. I requested materials through the King's Steward, rare herbs, magical catalysts, equipment that cost more than entire villages. Everything was provided without question. 3 months into my work, the steward delivered something unexpected, a sealed letter with the royal crest. Inside was a single line, written in elegant script. I'm watching your progress with interest. Don't stop now. D. The Alpha King was personally monitoring my research. I should have felt pressure. Instead, I felt something dangerous, ambition. If I succeeded, I wouldn't just save lives. I'd fundamentally alter the power structure of the kingdom. I'd prove that humans weren't inferior, just different. And difference could be bridged. I returned to my work with renewed focus, and for the first time since my mother's death, I felt something close to hope. Not for myself. Not yet. But for the possibility that the world could be changed. One experiment at a time. Chapter 5, The Night Visitor. The breakthrough came on a winter night 6 months into my research. I'd been testing a compound derived from wolfsbane ironic, given its reputation as a poison to shifters. But Meredith's notes suggested that in microscopic doses, properly processed, it could temporarily suppress the human genetic resistance to magic. Not permanently, not safely, but enough to test whether magical integration was possible. I'd just completed the synthesis when I heard footsteps on the tower stairs. No one came to my tower. The guards knew it was forbidden. The steward sent materials via a delivery system we'd established. I was alone here by design and by royal decree, which meant whoever was climbing those stairs had the authority to ignore both. I set down my vial carefully and reached for the knife I kept on my workbench. Meredith had taught me basic defense, not because I could win a fight against a shifter, but because making myself difficult to kill bought time. Time to think, time to negotiate, time to survive. The footsteps stopped outside my laboratory door. Then, a knock, 3 sharp raps, exactly like the guards had used in the throne room. "Enter," I called, keeping my voice steady. The door opened. The Alpha King stepped into my laboratory. He wore traveling clothes, simple, dark, designed for movement rather than ceremony. His hair was windswept, suggesting he'd come quickly. And his eyes were different than they'd been in the throne room. Less controlled, more dangerous. "Your Majesty." I set down the knife and bowed. I wasn't expecting. "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't pretend you don't know why I'm here." I didn't know. But I'd learned that admitting ignorance to predators was inviting attack, so I waited. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, studying my laboratory with the same intensity he'd studied me months ago. His gaze lingered on the surgical instruments, the preserved specimens in jars, the books stacked in precarious towers. "You live like she did," he said finally. "Meredith. Surrounded by death and knowledge, treating them as equal companions." "Knowledge comes from understanding death," I replied. "Your aunt taught me that. She taught you a lot of things." He moved deeper into the room, and I noticed he was careful not to touch anything, respectful of the work, even as his presence dominated the space. "Your last report was intriguing. You claim you've isolated the genetic resistance mechanism." "I have. Prove it." I blinked. "I can show you the documentation, the test results." "No." He stopped at my workbench, his eyes fixed on the vial I'd just completed. "Show me. Demonstrate. Use it." My stomach dropped. "You want me to test it? On a subject?" "On me." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "That's insane," I said before I could stop myself. "The compound is untested on living subjects. It could kill you. It could trigger an allergic reaction, cause neural damage, disrupt your ability to shift, all of which would prove whether your theory is sound." He picked up the vial, holding it to the light. The amber liquid inside caught the firelight, glowing like captured sunset. "If it harms me, we know the approach is flawed. If it does nothing, we know the dosage is insufficient. And if it works, we know that human genetic resistance can be temporarily suppressed." I finished. "But testing on the Alpha King is the fastest way to get results." He set the vial down and looked at me directly. "I didn't come here just for this, Revna. I came because I need to know if you're serious, if you're capable, or if you're just a clever human playing with concepts you don't truly understand." The insult stung because it was designed to. He was testing me, pushing to see if I'd break under pressure. "I understand perfectly," I said coldly. "I understand that you're gambling with your life because you're desperate. The extremists are pushing harder than you expected. The attacks on mixed families are escalating. And you need a solution now, not in 5 years." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or respect. "Smart girl," he murmured. "Yes. Last week they burned a house with a human-born child inside. The parents, too, left a message carved into the door. Purity or death. The council is fracturing. Half want to appease the extremists with restrictions on mixed marriages. The other half want to execute the extremists and damn the consequences. I'm running out of time to offer them a third option. And if this kills you, who stops the civil war then? My brother. And he'll do it by giving the extremists exactly what they want." Damien's voice was flat, emotionless. "He'll pass the purity laws, execute every human-born child in the kingdom, and rule over the ashes of whatever's left. So you see, Revna, I'm not gambling with my life. I'm gambling with thousands of them." I stared at him, at this man who held absolute power yet stood in my laboratory asking me to potentially kill him because the alternative was worse. There was a kind of terrible nobility in it, or maybe just desperation dressed up as courage. "If I do this," I said slowly, "I need your word that you won't retaliate if something goes wrong, that you'll let the research continue with another subject. You have it. And I need you to understand that this is preliminary. Even if it works, it only proves concept, not application. Translating this to permanent transformation will take years of additional research." "I understand." I took a breath. my mind racing through calculations. The dosage would need to be adjusted for his body mass. The delivery method mattered. Injection would be faster but riskier. Oral would be slower but more controllable. And I'd need to monitor his vital signs throughout, ready to intervene if... Stop thinking and start doing, Damien said. I can see your mind working, trust it. I met his eyes and saw something unexpected there. Trust. Not in me. Exactly. But in the research. In Meredith's work. In the possibility that knowledge could save them, where violence had failed. Sit, I instructed, gesturing to the chair I used for detailed work. And don't move unless I tell you to. He obeyed without argument, and I felt a strange shift in our dynamic. Here in my laboratory, I was the authority. He was the subject. The power imbalance inverted, at least temporarily. I prepared the dosage with shaking hands, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. If this worked, everything changed. If it failed, don't think about failure, I told myself. Think about the science. I drew the compound into a syringe, measured twice, then approached him. This goes into your upper arm. You'll feel immediate warmth, possibly discomfort. If you experience sharp pain, difficulty breathing, or visual distortion, tell me immediately. Don't try to be stoic. Don't hide symptoms. Clear? Clear. I swabbed his arm with alcohol, found the vein, and hesitated for just a moment. This was the Alpha King. One mistake and I'd die screaming. But one success and I'd change history. I pushed the needle in and depressed the plunger. The compound entered his bloodstream like liquid gold. I watched his face for reaction, counting seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15. His eyes widened. What do you feel? I asked, my hand already reaching for the antidote I'd prepared just in case. Heat, he said, his voice strained. Like fire in my veins. And something else. Something. My wolf. I can feel him differently. Like there's less. Separation. My heart hammered. That's the resistance suppression. Your human consciousness and your wolf consciousness are integrating more fully than usual. It should pass in. No. He gripped the chair arms, his knuckles white. It's not passing. It's growing. Revna. I can feel. His body convulsed. I lunged for the antidote, but he caught my wrist within human speed. His eyes had shifted fully to wolf gold, but his face remained human. A hybrid state I'd never seen before. Don't, he growled, his voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't be possible in human form. I need to feel this. I need to understand, he screamed. Not in pain. In transformation. But it wasn't a normal shift. Those were instant, smooth, a practice magic honed over lifetimes. This was something else. Something raw and primal and wrong. His bones cracked audibly. His skin rippled. Fur sprouted and receded in waves, like his body couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I watched in horror and fascination as the Alpha King underwent a transformation that shouldn't be possible. Caught between forms. Trapped in a state of becoming that defied every principle of shifter magic I'd learned. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. He collapsed forward, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. When he looked up at me, his eyes were still wolf gold, but his face was human, mostly human. There were traces of the beast in the sharpness of his features, the elongation of his canines. What did you do to me? He whispered. I suppressed your genetic resistance, I said, my scientific mind already analyzing what I'd witnessed. But you don't have human genetics, you're pure shifter, which means the compound did something different. It broke down the barriers between your forms, made them permeable. I felt everything, he said, still breathing hard. The wolf's instincts without losing human thought, the human's reasoning without losing wolf senses. I was both, completely both. That shouldn't be possible, but it is. He stood, unsteady but determined, and gripped my shoulders. His hands were shaking. Do you understand what this means? If shifters can access both forms simultaneously, if we can think with human minds while using wolf strength, the tactical applications would be unprecedented, I finished. Soldiers who could strategize and fight with equal facility. Leaders who could tap into predator instincts without losing rational judgment. But Damien, I used his name without thinking, too excited by the implications to remember protocol. This was an accident. I don't know how to replicate it. I don't know how long it lasts or what the side effects. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was pure adrenaline and victory and the raw thrill of discovery. His mouth claimed mine with the same certainty he'd claimed the throne, absolutely, without question, without mercy. For a heartbeat, I froze. Then I kissed him back. Because I'd spent 10 years isolated in a tower with only corpses and books for company. Because I was 18 and alive, and I'd just accomplished something impossible. Because he was the first person in a decade who'd looked at me and seen not a disposable human but an equal. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. That was, I started. A mistake, he finished, stepping back. Ignore it. The compound must have affected my judgment. The compound wore off 30 seconds ago, I said flatly, checking my timepiece. That was all you. He stared at me, something dangerous flickering in those hybrid eyes. Then he laughed, really laughed. Not the sharp bark from the throne room but genuine amusement. Meredith was right, he said. You are the most dangerous human in the kingdom. Because I'm smart? Because you're honest. He moved toward the door, his movements already steadier. Continue your research. Focus on replicating what just happened. If we can train soldiers to access hybrid form, we won't need to solve the human-born problem. We'll be too powerful for the extremists to challenge. That's not a solution, I argued. That's just a bigger threat. You'll still have human children being killed. He paused at the door. Then work faster, and find both answers. You have 4 years now, not 5. And Revna? He glanced back. Tell no one about tonight. What happened here stays between us. Why? Because if the council knows I'm experimenting on myself, they'll see weakness. And if the extremists know I'm trying to empower humans, they'll accelerate their plans. This research and you only survive if they remain secret. He left before I could respond. I stood alone in my laboratory, my lips still tingling from that impossible kiss, my mind racing with implications and possibilities and dangers. The Alpha King had kissed me. The Alpha King had trusted me with his life. The Alpha King had just given me the keys to power that could reshape the kingdom. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "This is how you make them pay. This is how you become more than the girl sold for 30 silver marks." I returned to my workbench and began documenting everything that had happened, my hands steady, my purpose crystallized. I would solve this. I would find the answer that saved human children and empowered the kingdom. And in doing so, I would become untouchable. The game had changed tonight. Now I just needed to learn how to play it. Chapter 6. The Price of Secrets. Damien returned 3 more times over the next 2 months. Always at night. Always unannounced. Always with that same intensity that made the air in my laboratory feel charged with electricity. We never spoke about the kiss. But something had shifted between us. A recognition, perhaps, or an understanding that we were bound together now by secrets that could destroy us both. He became my primary test subject, enduring each new compound variation with a stoicism that bordered on recklessness. I became his confidant, listening to the political pressures mounting against him as the extremists grew bolder. "They killed another child yesterday," he told me one night, his voice flat as he sat in my laboratory chair. 5 years old, mixed family. The parents tried to hide her, but someone informed. They dragged her into the street and executed her in front of witnesses. My hands stilled on the vial I was preparing. "Did you catch them?" "Yes." "I executed them in turn. Publicly. Brutally." He looked at me with those amber eyes that haunted my dreams. "It won't stop them. For every extremist I kill, 2 more rise up. They're calling themselves the Pure Fang now. They have funding, organization, political backing from council members I thought were loyal. How long before they move against you directly?" 3 months. Maybe less." He rolled up his sleeve, offering me his arm for the injection. "Which is why we need results. The hybrid form works I've been practicing, and I can hold it for nearly an hour now. But if I'm the only one who can do it, I'm just a target with a unique ability. I need to be able to offer this to my loyalists. Create an elite force that can suppress the pure Fang before they trigger full civil war. I prepared the new compound, a refined version that should allow for longer hybrid state duration. And the human-born children? Were no closer to solving their problem. One crisis at a time. He watched me work with an attention that made my skin prickle. Unless you've had a breakthrough you haven't reported? I had, but I wasn't ready to share it yet. 3 weeks ago, I'd discovered something in Meredith's final notes, something she'd hidden in cipher within cipher, protected by layers of encryption that suggested she'd known how dangerous the information was. A theoretical framework for not just suppressing human genetic resistance, but reversing it entirely. Not making humans into shifters through external magic, but activating dormant shifter genetics that existed in all humans. Because according to Meredith's theory, humans and shifters weren't different species. They were the same species, diverged through magical mutation thousands of years ago, which meant every human carried the genetic blueprint for transformation. It was just locked away, suppressed by generations of evolutionary pressure. If I could unlock it. But the process would require a catalyst. Something powerful enough to rewrite genetic code. Something that existed in only one source. Alpha blood. Specifically, the blood of the ruling Alpha, whose magical potency was enhanced by the weight of Dominion itself. Damien's blood. And not just a sample. The amount required would be significant, dangerous, potentially fatal if taken all at once. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not when he was already gambling his life on my research every time he visited. Not when I didn't fully understand the mechanism or the risks. No breakthrough, I lied, sliding the needle into his vein. Just incremental progress. He caught my wrist as I depressed the plunger, his grip gentle but firm. You're lying. My heart stopped. I'm not. I can hear your heartbeat accelerate when you lie. Shifter hearing, remember? He didn't sound angry. Just curious. What have you found that you're not telling me? I could keep lying. Or I could gamble on honesty. A theoretical framework, I admitted, based on Meredith's final research, but it's dangerous, untested, and requires resources I don't have access to. I'm not hiding it to be deceptive. I'm hiding it because it's not ready, and I won't risk your life on theory. He studied me for a long moment, then released my wrist. Tell me anyway. So I did. I explained Meredith's theory about shared genetics, about dormant shifter blueprints in human DNA, about the catalyst required to activate transformation. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to fascination to something darker: calculation. Alpha blood, he said when I finished. You need my blood. In quantities that could weaken you significantly. And I'd need to extract it over time. Process it. Refine it. The procedure would take months and leave you vulnerable during a period when you can't afford vulnerability. How much would you need? Total? I'd done the calculations a dozen times. Approximately 3 liters. Extracted over 6 months to allow your body to regenerate safely. 3 liters is survivable. Barely. And only if you're not simultaneously using your magic, fighting battles, or maintaining the hybrid transformations we've been testing. Any one of those things would strain your system. All of them together could kill you. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the compound now flowing through his veins. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Do it. What? Start the extraction process, tonight. Begin collecting what you need. Damien, you're not listening. I am listening. He stood, looming over me in the small space. I'm listening to you tell me that you've found a way to solve this permanently. To give human-born children the one thing that would make them equal transformation. Do you understand what that would mean? Not just politically, but fundamentally. You'd eliminate the entire basis for the purity movement. There would be no reason to kill human children if they could be turned into shifters. If it works, I stressed. This is all theoretical. Meredith's theories were rarely wrong. He gripped my shoulders, and I felt the warmth of him, the barely controlled power that hummed beneath his skin. We're running out of time. The Pure Fang is planning something, I can feel it. They're too quiet, too organized. Whatever they're building toward, it's coming soon. I need solutions, Revna. Even dangerous ones. especially dangerous ones. I looked into those amber eyes and saw desperation wrapped in determination. He was gambling again, not just with his life, but with the future of the kingdom, and he was asking me to be his partner in the bet. 3 conditions, I said. First, you let me monitor you constantly. Any sign of weakness, we stop immediately. Second, you reduce your use of hybrid form to once per week maximum. Your body needs to conserve energy for regeneration. Third, I hesitated. Third, you tell me the truth. Why are you really doing this? Because there's something you're not saying. His hands dropped from my shoulders. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. Because I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of ruling through fear. Tired of watching children die for circumstances they didn't choose. Tired of being the bloodless king, the merciless, the monster they whisper about. If your research works, if we can offer transformation to human-born children, I can be something else. Something better. A king who solved the problem, instead of just suppressing it. You want to be a hero, I said softly. I want to be worthy of the power I hold. He smiled, and it was painful in its honesty. Is that foolish? No. I turned to my equipment cabinet and began pulling out what I'd need for blood extraction. It's human, which is perhaps the most dangerous thing you could be. We began the extraction process that night. I drew the first liter over 3 hours, monitoring his vital signs obsessively. He bore it without complaint, though I could see the strain it caused. When I finally stopped, he was pale and shaking. You need to rest, I told him, helping him to the small bed I kept in the corner for the rare occasions I collapsed from exhaustion. At least a few hours before you try to leave. Can't. I have a council meeting at dawn. Then you'll attend it weakened and probably make disastrous decisions. Lie down, that's an order. He blinked. You're ordering me? In matters of your health, yes. I'm the expert here, remember? I pushed him toward the bed with more force than was probably wise. Besides, you gave me autonomy over the research. That includes managing my test subject. He went, which told me exactly how exhausted he was. I covered him with the spare blanket and returned to my workbench to begin processing the blood sample while it was fresh. The science was delicate, intricate. I needed to isolate the specific magical compounds in his blood, concentrate them, and then stabilize them for long-term storage. It would take hours of careful work. Behind me, I heard his breathing deepen into sleep. I worked through the night, and as dawnlight began to filter through my laboratory windows, I realized something that terrified me. I cared about him, not just as my benefactor or my research subject, but as a person. I cared about his exhaustion, his desperate attempt to be better than the circumstances that had shaped him, his willingness to gamble everything on the possibility of change. I cared, which meant I was vulnerable, which meant I needed to be more careful than ever. I finished processing the blood just as he woke, groggy and disoriented. I made him drink water and eat the simple bread and cheese I kept stocked, then checked his vitals again, still weak but recovering. You can go, I said. But come back in 3 days. Not before. Your body needs time to regenerate. He stood, swaying slightly, then caught himself. Thank you, Revna. For what? For caring. He said it simply, like stating an obvious fact. I can see it in how you work, how you monitor me. You're not just doing this for the research anymore. You care whether I survive. I wanted to deny it, but I'd already committed to honesty between us. I care, I admitted, which is dangerous for both of us. I know. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, the feeling is mutual. He left before I could respond. I stood alone in my laboratory, watching the processed blood sample on my workbench glow with an inner light that shouldn't exist in mere biology. Alpha blood, infused with magic, distilled to its most potent essence. The key to everything I'd been working toward, and the most dangerous substance in the kingdom. I locked it away in a secure container and made myself a promise. I would complete this research. I would find the answer that saved human children and empowered the kingdom, but I would not let myself fall in love with the Alpha King. That was one risk I couldn't afford to take. Unfortunately, I was already beginning to realize it was a promise I couldn't keep. Chapter 7, The Shattering. 4 months passed in a blur of blood and breakthrough. Damien came every 3 days, as regular as clockwork. We fell into a rhythm: extraction, monitoring, recovery. Between visits, I refined the catalyst, tested it on tissue samples, and slowly pieced together the mechanism that might allow permanent transformation in humans. But something else was happening too. Something I hadn't planned for and couldn't control. We talked, not just about research or politics, but about everything. He told me about his childhood, the brutal training that shaped alpha heirs, the loneliness of being groomed for absolute power, the moment he'd killed his father and felt nothing but relief. I told him about my mother's stories, about Uncle Silas in the marketplace, about the 10 years I'd spent in this tower learning to survive through knowledge. We shared meals when his schedule allowed. We debated philosophy and strategy and the nature of power. We built something that felt dangerously close to friendship, and underneath it, something even more dangerous: understanding. I learned that he hated formal ceremonies but attended them perfectly because duty demanded it. That he read poetry in secret because it was considered too soft for an alpha. That he wanted children someday but feared what kind of father he'd be, given what his own father had been. He learned that I still had nightmares about the marketplace. That I'd never forgiven my uncle. And a part of me still measured my worth in silver marks. That I was terrified of being disposable, which was why I drove myself to exhaustion, making myself indispensable. "You're not disposable," he told me one night, his hand covering mine on the workbench. "You could stop the research tomorrow and you'd still matter. You know that, right?" I didn't. But I wanted to believe him. The catalyst was nearly complete. 3 more weeks, I estimated. 3 more weeks, and I'd have enough processed alpha blood to attempt the first transformation trial. We'd need a volunteer, a human-born child whose parents were desperate enough to risk the experimental procedure. Finding one wouldn't be difficult. The Pure Fang had escalated their attacks. 17 children had died in 4 months. Families were desperate, willing to try anything. But everything changed on a cold night in late spring. Damien arrived at my tower later than usual, and I knew immediately something was wrong. His movements were too sharp, his eyes too bright. The hybrid state he'd been practicing, he was caught in it without meaning to be, his control slipping. "What happened?" I asked, reaching for him instinctively. He caught my hands, gripping them hard enough to hurt. "They're moving. The Pure Fang. Tomorrow night, they're planning a coordinated attack on every mixed family in the capital. 50 homes. Over 100 children." My blood went cold. "How do you know?" "I have spies in their organization. One got word to me an hour ago." His voice was ragged, strained. "I'm mobilizing every loyal soldier I have. We'll protect the families, kill anyone who attacks. But Revna, this is it. This is the breaking point. After tomorrow, there's no going back. Either I crush the Pure Fang completely, or they trigger the civil war. Then we need the catalyst ready now. If you can offer transformation to the children they're targeting, there's no time." He released my hands and began pacing like a caged wolf. "The catalyst won't be ready for weeks. The procedure itself takes days. We can't save them that way." "Then what?" "I need you to create something else." He stopped, turning to face me with desperate intensity. "A weapon. Something that will give my soldiers an advantage. The hybrid form is useful, but it's not enough. I need them stronger, faster, more lethal. I need them to be able to face Pure Fang extremists and win decisively. You want me to weaponize the research?" I said it flatly, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "I want you to help me protect innocent children from being slaughtered." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "Please, Revna. I know this isn't what we planned. I know it corrupts the work. But if I lose tomorrow, if the Pure Fang succeeds, everything we've built dies with those children. The catalyst, the transformation research, the hope for change. All of it ends." He was right. I knew he was right. But something about this felt wrong, like we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. "What exactly are you asking for?" "A combat enhancement. Something my soldiers can take that will push them into hybrid form faster. Hold it longer. Increase their strength and speed. Even temporary. Even if it causes damage afterward. I just need them strong enough to win tomorrow night." I thought about it, my mind racing through possibilities. The compounds I'd developed could theoretically be modified for that purpose. Increase the dosage, Add stimulants to override the body's natural limiters. Create something that forced transformation into hybrid state and sustained it through sheer chemical aggression. It would be brutal. The side effects would be severe, possibly permanent damage to the soldier's ability to shift naturally. They'd be burning out their own systems for temporary power. But it would work. I can do it, I said quietly. But Damien, you need to understand what you're asking. The soldiers who take this, they'll be trading long-term health for short-term power. Some might never shift properly again. Some might die from the strain. They'll volunteer. I'll make sure they understand the risks. Will they really have a choice? You're their alpha. Your word is law. He flinched, and I saw the wound strike home. I know. But what's the alternative? Let the children die? Let the pure Fang win? I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him there had to be another way. But I'd spent 4 months watching him try every other option: negotiation, compromise, political maneuvering. The extremists weren't interested in peace. They wanted purity or death. And if I didn't help him, death would win. I'll need 4 hours, I said, maybe 5, and I'll need you to send for these supplies. I grabbed parchment and began writing a list. Can you get them here within the hour? Yes. Relief flooded his expression. Thank you, Revna. I know this isn't. Don't. I cut him off. Don't thank me for this. Just make sure it's worth it. Make sure those children survive. He nodded and took the list, moving toward the door with renewed purpose. But he stopped at the threshold, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When this is over, he said softly. When the pure Fang is crushed and we have time again, I want to tell you something. Something I should have said weeks ago. What? After. When I can say it without either of us questioning whether it's real or just desperation. He managed a smile. Painful and genuine. Wait for me? My throat tightened. Always. He left. And I stood alone with the weight of what I was about to create pressing down on me like physical force. I was making weapons. Turning my research, Meredith's research, into tools for killing. It didn't matter that the cause was just, that we were protecting innocence. The line between protection and destruction was always thinner than people wanted to believe. But I'd made my choice. I'd chosen him. Chosen this path. Chosen to be complicit in whatever came next. I just hoped we'd survive long enough to regret it. The supplies arrived within the hour. I worked through the night, pushing my body and mind to their limits. The combat enhancement came together with terrifying ease, all my months of research crystallizing into something deadly and efficient. By dawn, I had 20 doses ready, 20 syringes filled with liquid that glowed faintly amber, packed with enough concentrated magic and chemical aggression to turn ordinary soldiers into temporary monsters. Damien returned as the sun crested the horizon. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. It's ready, I told him, gesturing to the case containing the syringes. 1 dose per soldier. It'll trigger hybrid transformation within seconds and sustain it for approximately 2 hours. After that, they'll crash hard. Keep them under medical supervision for at least 24 hours post-combat. He picked up one of the syringes, studying it in the morning light. Side effects? Severe muscle damage. Possible permanent disruption to natural shifting ability. In extreme cases, neural damage or death. I made myself say it clearly, clinically. They need to know the cost. They will. He carefully placed the syringe back in the case. I'm using it too. 1 of these doses. What? No. I grabbed his arm. You've been weakened by the blood extractions. Your system can't handle. I'm their alpha. I lead from the front. Or I don't deserve to lead at all. His voice was firm. Final. Besides, someone needs to test it in actual combat. Might as well be me. Damien. He pulled me against him suddenly, crushing me in an embrace that drove the breath from my lungs. I felt his heart hammering against my chest, felt the tremor in his muscles that he was trying to hide. If I don't come back, he whispered against my hair. Finish the research. Complete the catalyst. Offer it to my brother. He's not as bad as I make him sound. Give him the weapon he needs to end this cleanly. You're coming back, I said fiercely, gripping his shirt. You're taking that enhancement, you're protecting those children, And you're coming back here to tell me whatever it is you've been too scared to say. He pulled back enough to look at me, and I saw fear in his eyes for the first time since I'd met him. Not fear of death. Fear of something else. I love you, he said. That's what I was going to wait to tell you. But I'm realizing I might not get another chance. So I'm saying it now. I love you, Revna. Your mind, your courage, your refusal to be anything less than exactly who you are. I love you, and I'm terrified that I've doomed us both by admitting it. The world seemed to stop. The Alpha King loved me. The most powerful shifter in the kingdom loved a human girl who'd been sold for 30 silver marks. You're an idiot, I whispered. A brilliant, reckless, impossible idiot. Is that a yes? That's an I love you too. Now go save those children so we can figure out what the hell we're doing together. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, and utterly without reservation. A kiss that tasted like goodbye and promise and terror all mixed together. When he pulled away, he was smiling. Wait for me. I already said I would. He took the case of syringes and left. I stood at my window and watched him cross the courtyard, his shoulders squared with determination, carrying weapons I'd made into a battle that would determine everything. And I prayed to gods I'd stopped believing in that he'd survive, that we'd both survive. That love, impossible, dangerous love, would be enough. Chapter 8. Blood and Choice. The battle lasted 12 hours. I received no word throughout the day. No messengers, no updates, nothing but the distant sounds of chaos drifting across the city. Screams, howls, the clash of steel and magic. I paced my laboratory like a caged animal, unable to work, unable to think about anything except whether Damien was alive or dead. By evening, smoke darkened the sky. The smell of burning buildings carried on the wind. I'd nearly decided to violate his orders and leave the tower to search for information when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, uneven footsteps. Someone injured. I grabbed my medical supplies and rushed to the door. Damien stumbled through, and my heart stopped. He was covered in blood, his own and others. His clothes were shredded. Deep gashes carved through his chest and arms. Still bleeding despite his shifter healing. His eyes were wild, still caught partially in hybrid form, the amber too bright and too feral. The children? I asked, already pulling him toward my workbench. Safe. All of them. His voice was hoarse, shredded from hours of combat. We killed 47 Pure Fang extremists. Lost 6 of my own soldiers. The rest. He winced as I began cleaning his wounds. The rest will recover, eventually. And you? How much damage did the enhancement cause? Enough. He caught my hand, forcing me to meet his eyes. Revna, we won. The families are safe. The Pure Fang is broken. Their leadership is dead. Their followers scattered. It worked. Your research worked. I should have felt triumph. Relief. Something positive. Instead, I felt hollow. At what cost? I asked quietly, cataloging his injuries. You're barely standing. Your healing is compromised. These wounds should have closed by now. How many soldiers are permanently damaged? How many will never shift properly again? 14. Out of 20. He said it flatly. And I heard the guilt beneath the words. 14 good soldiers who volunteered to protect innocent children and paid with their ability to transform naturally. They're effectively human now. Revna, human, in a world that will see them as broken, as lessers. The weight of that settled on both of us. 14 lives fundamentally altered by my creation. 14 people who'd trusted their alpha and paid the price. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be. They knew the risks. They chose it anyway. He stood, swaying slightly. And they saved 100 lives. That's the mathematics of war. Sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. I finished bandaging what I could, though most of his wounds needed time more than treatment. He'd survive, but recovery would take days, maybe weeks. The council is calling an emergency session tomorrow, he continued. With the Pure Fang leadership dead, the moderates are gaining ground. I'm going to propose a comprehensive solution. Offer transformation to all human-born children using your catalyst. Make it voluntary. Funded by the Crown. Available to any family that wants it. End the entire basis for the purity argument. My hands stilled. The catalyst isn't ready. It will be. Soon. And we need to move while we have political momentum. He gripped my shoulders, his intensity returning despite his exhaustion. This is our chance, Revna, to change everything. To make sure no more children die because of circumstances they didn't choose. And the soldiers who were damaged? What happens to them? I'll take care of them. Pensions, honors, positions that don't require combat. They sacrificed for the kingdom will provide for them. His voice softened. I promise. I wanted to believe him. But I'd seen too much of how the world worked to trust promises, even from him. There's something else, he said, and I heard hesitation in his voice. The council. They're going to demand accountability. They know I used experimental enhancements in combat. They're going to want to know where they came from, who created them, how much I knew about the risks. Understanding crashed over me like cold water. They're going to want me. Yes. Tomorrow, when I present at the council session, I need you there, as my scientific advisor, as the expert who developed the research that saved those children and the enhancement that won the battle. He stopped, struggling with words. As my partner in this, your partner in weapons development, I said bitterly. That's what I am now. That's what you're making me. No. He pulled me closer, his voice fierce. You're the woman who found a way to give powerless children power. Who solved a problem that's plagued this kingdom for generations. Who stood beside me when no one else would. That's what you are. That's what I'm asking the council to see. And if they don't, if they decide I'm dangerous, what then? He didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. We both knew what happened to dangerous humans in a shifter kingdom. Then I'll protect you, he said finally. Even if it costs me the throne. Even if it costs me everything, I'll protect you. I looked at him, this man who'd walked into my laboratory months ago as my king and somehow become so much more. This man who'd gambled his life on my research, who'd trusted me with power that could destroy him, who'd just fought a war to protect children he'd never met. This man I'd somehow fallen completely in love with, despite every logical reason not to. I'll come, I said. But Damien, after tomorrow, after the council session, we need to talk. Really talk. About what this is between us. About what it means. And whether it can survive in your world. I know. He pressed his forehead to mine, and I felt him trembling, whether from exhaustion or emotion. I couldn't tell. But tonight, can we just have this? Just a few hours where we're not the Alpha King and his human scientist? Where we're just us? I led him to the small bed in the corner and helped him lie down, his wounds still bleeding through the bandages. I lay beside him, careful not to jostle his injuries, and he pulled me close with the arm that wasn't mangled. Tell me a story, he murmured, his eyes already closing. Like your mother used to tell you. So I did. I told him about fairy tales where beauty could break curses, where love conquered kingdoms, where impossible things became real through courage and sacrifice. I told him stories until his breathing deepened into sleep, until the tension left his body and he was just a man, wounded and exhausted and trusting me to keep him safe. And I made myself a promise. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever the council decided, whatever dangers we faced, I wouldn't let them take him. I wouldn't let this world destroy the one person who'd looked at me and seen not a disposable human but an equal. Even if it meant burning the kingdom down to save him. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Carved from black stone and lit by enchanted flames that cast no warmth, it felt more like a tomb than a seat of government. 12 council members sat in a semicircle around the central floor where Damien stood, with me beside him, all shifters, all pure-blood nobles, all looking at me like I was a particularly interesting insect they were considering crushing. Let me understand this correctly, said Councillor Thorne, a silver-haired woman whose family controlled the mining territories. You're asking us to approve the use of experimental procedures on human-born children, based on research conducted by a human with no formal credentials, no oversight, and no accountability to this body. I'm asking you to approve a solution to a problem that's plagued us for generations, Damien replied, his voice steady, despite the wounds I knew were still healing beneath his formal clothes. Scholar Meredith Thornwick spent 50 years developing this research. Revna has spent 10 years refining it. The science is sound. The science killed 14 soldiers, another counselor interjected. permanently damaged their ability to shift. You used experimental combat enhancements without authorization, without testing, without consideration for the long-term consequences. That's reckless at best, criminal at worst. It saved 100 children's lives, I said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to me. 14 soldiers volunteered, knowing the risks, to protect families that would have been slaughtered otherwise. That's not criminal, that's heroism. The human speaks, Thorne said with barely concealed disdain. Tell me, girl, what gives you the right to make decisions that affect shifter lives? What possible authority do you possess? Knowledge, I replied simply. I possess knowledge that none of you have. Understanding of genetics, magical theory, the mechanism of transformation. I possess the culmination of Scholar Meredith Thornwick's life work, and I'm the only person alive who can complete it. That's my authority. Arrogance from livestock, muttered a younger counselor. Damien's hand shot out, gripping the man's throat before anyone could react. The hybrid form rippled through him, partial, controlled, terrifying. His eyes blazed amber as he held the counselor suspended, gasping. Say that again, Damien growled, his voice layered with harmonics. Call her livestock one more time and see what happens. Your Majesty, Thorne started. No. Damien released the counselor, who collapsed, gasping. You don't get to sit here and debate the value of human life while children are being executed in the streets. You don't get to question the authority of someone who's done more for this kingdom in 10 years than most of you have done in lifetimes. Revna is my scientific advisor, sanctioned by the crown, protected by my authority. Anyone who challenges that, challenges me directly. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Thorne spoke, her voice careful. Your Majesty, no one questions your authority. But we must consider the implications. If you elevate a human to a position of power, if you openly ally yourself with her, the traditionalists will see it as weakness. The Pure Fang may be broken, but their ideology isn't dead. You'll be giving ammunition to anyone who wants to challenge your rule. Then let them challenge me. Damien's voice was cold steel. I've killed every challenger who's faced me. I'll kill the next ones too. But I won't sacrifice progress to appease bigots. The transformation catalyst will be completed within months. We will offer it to every human-born child whose family wants it. We will end this problem permanently. That's not a proposal, it's a decision. You can support it and be part of the solution, or oppose it and become irrelevant. Choose. The power play was blatant, aggressive, and entirely effective. I watched the counselors exchange glances, calculating political advantage, weighing loyalty against ambition. Finally, Thorne nodded. The Council will support your initiative, Your Majesty, provided we receive regular reports on the research progress and maintain oversight of its application. Agreed, Damien said. Revna will provide monthly documentation, but the research itself remains under Crown authority. No interference. Acceptable. The rest of the session passed in a blur of political maneuvering and formal protocols. I answered questions about the science, carefully editing what I revealed, protecting the most dangerous secrets. By the time we were dismissed, my head ached and my heart was pounding. We walked from the council chamber in silence, surrounded by guards but utterly alone in our shared understanding of what had just happened. Damien had openly claimed me as his, not just his scientist or his advisor, but his ally, his partner. In a world where humans were property and shifters were rulers, he'd elevated me to a position that made us equals in the eyes of the law. It was revolutionary. It was dangerous. It was exactly what I'd needed. When we reached the corridor outside my tower, he dismissed the guards with a gesture. We stood alone in the evening shadows, and I could see exhaustion and pain written across his features. Are you sure about this? I asked quietly. About claiming me so publicly? You've made me a target now. Made yourself vulnerable by association. I know. He reached out, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. But I'm tired of hiding what matters. I'm tired of pretending that power means isolation. You've given me more in 6 months than most people receive in a lifetime partnership, understanding, something close to hope. I won't hide that. I won't diminish it by keeping it secret, even if it costs you. Even then. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to mine. Besides, I think we're past the point of protecting each other by staying apart. We're bound now, Revna. For better or worse. Probably worse, I murmured, but I was smiling. Definitely worse. He kissed me, soft and slow and tender. But I'll take worse with you over better with anyone else. We stood there as darkness fell over the city, two people who shouldn't exist together but somehow did, building something fragile and fierce, and possibly doomed. But for that moment, it was enough. 3 months later, the catalyst was complete. The first transformation trial was conducted on a 6-year-old girl named Elena, human-born to shifter parents who'd been preparing to flee the kingdom to save her life. We performed the procedure in my laboratory, with Damien present and a full medical team standing by. I administered the catalyst-refined alpha blood combined with genetic activators and waited. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Elena lay on the examination table, her small hand clutching her mother's, her eyes wide with fear and hope mixed together. Then her body began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter, as if light was building beneath her skin. She gasped, not in pain but in wonder, and I watched through my instruments as her genetic code rewrote itself in real time. The dormant shifter blueprint activating, spreading, integrating with her existing structure. When the light faded, she sat up, looked at her hands, and smiled. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The wolf. She's there. She's really there." Her mother sobbed. Her father fell to his knees in gratitude. And Damien looked at me with an expression of pure awe. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." I had. I'd taken a child who'd been marked for death, and given her power, given her equality, given her a future. For the first time since Uncle Silas had sold me in that marketplace, I felt like my life had been worth the cost. We conducted 17 more successful transformations over the next month. 17 children who would live, who would shift, who would never have to fear being human in a shifter world. The news spread like wildfire. Applications flooded in from families across the kingdom. The transformation program became the most significant initiative in generations. And I became something unprecedented, a human hero in a shifter kingdom. The girl sold for 30 silver marks had become the woman who changed the world. Epilogue. The weight of crowns. 5 years later, I stood at the window of what had once been my prison, and was now my sanctuary, watching the city below transform in the golden light of early morning. Iron Peak had changed. The human quarters were cleaner now, better maintained. Mixed families walked the streets without fear. Children, human-born children who'd undergone transformation, played in parks that had once been forbidden to them. The world was different. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. Behind me, I heard the door open and close. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. I'd learned to recognize his footsteps years ago, confident, purposeful, but softer when he came to me than when he walked his palace halls. "You're up early," Damien said, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "Couldn't sleep?" "Thinking," I replied, leaning back against him. "About how far we've come, about how much has changed. Having regrets?" "No. Just reflections." I turned in his arms to face him. 5 years had added lines around his eyes, threads of silver in his dark hair. The weight of rule had marked him, but he carried it with more grace now, more certainty. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night in my laboratory? About wanting to be worthy of the power you held?" "I remember. Are you worthy?" He considered the question seriously, as he always did when I asked him difficult things. "I'm trying to be. Every day. That's all I can promise." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Why do you ask?" "Because the council is going to ask you to marry soon, to produce an heir, to secure the succession." I said it calmly, though my heart was hammering. We'd been dancing around this conversation for months. They're getting restless. 5 years without a clear successor makes them nervous. His arms tightened around me. "I know. You could marry a pure-blood noble. Someone appropriate. Someone who'd give you shifter children without complication. Someone—" "Stop." He pulled back enough to look at me directly. "Is that what you think I want? I think you have to consider what's best for the kingdom." "What's best for the kingdom," he said slowly, "is a ruler who leads by example, who practices what he preaches, who doesn't demand of his people what he won't demand of himself. He took my hand, the one that still bore a faint scar from the day we'd shaken on our first accord. 5 years ago, you gave me a way to transform human-born children into shifters. You solved the problem that was tearing my kingdom apart. You stood beside me through political battles, assassination attempts, and the complete restructuring of our social order. You've earned more respect from my people than most queens inherit. I'm still human, Damien. So? He smiled. We've spent 5 years proving that. Doesn't matter. That power comes from knowledge, from courage, from the willingness to do what's necessary even when it's terrifying. You have more of that than anyone I've ever met. Why would I choose someone else? My throat tightened. Because it would be easier, because it would be politically safe, because I'm supposed to marry for duty instead of love? He cupped my face in both hands. I've done everything else for duty, Revna. I've killed for it, bled for it, sacrificed pieces of my soul for it. But this, I'm choosing for myself. If you'll have me. It wasn't a casual question. In shifter culture, a formal proposal from an alpha was binding, witnessed by magic itself. If I said yes, we'd be bound together in ways that transcended human marriage. Soul deep. Unbreakable. The council will fight it, I warned. The traditionalists will call it an abomination. We'll face challenges, possibly violence. Our children, if we have them, will be scrutinized, questioned, used as weapons against us. I know. His smile was fierce and certain. Marry me anyway. Stand beside me as my equal, my partner, my queen. Help me build a kingdom where our children, human or shifter or both, can live without fear. Where the girl sold for 30 silver marks can become the woman who rules beside the Alpha King. I thought about that marketplace, about Uncle Silas counting his coins, about the merchant who'd bought me like livestock. I thought about the tower, the years of isolation, the slow building of knowledge and power. I thought about the first time I'd met Damien and seen not just danger but possibility. And I thought about the promise I'd made to myself as a child. That I would survive. And then I would make them all pay. I had survived. I'd done more than survive, I'd thrived. And the payment I'd extracted wasn't revenge. It was this. Becoming someone who mattered. Someone who couldn't be sold or dismissed, or treated as disposable. Yes, I said. I'll marry you. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I felt the magic of his acceptance settle over us like a blessing, binding us together in ways that would last until death and possibly beyond. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed something into my hand. A small velvet box. Inside was a ring not ornate, but elegant. A band of silver wrapped around a single perfect diamond. Simple, beautiful, exactly right. It was my mother's, he said quietly. The only thing of hers I kept. She was human too, did you know that? Human who married my father for political alliance and gave him shifter sons anyway. She died when I was young, but I remember her telling me that being human didn't mean being weak. It meant being adaptable, resilient, capable of surviving anything. He slipped the ring onto my finger. I think she would have liked you. I looked at the ring, at this man who'd gone from my captor to my collaborator to my partner, and felt something like peace settle in my chest. What happens now? I asked. Now. He pulled me close again. Now, we face the council together. We announce our engagement. We weather whatever political storm follows. We continue the transformation program, expand it to other territories. We build the kingdom we want to live in, one decision at a time. He paused. And eventually, when you're ready, we have children who'll grow up in a world where their value isn't determined by whether they can shift. That sounds exhausting. It will be, he grinned. But we've handled worse. Remember that first night? When I nearly collapsed from the blood extraction, and you ordered me to rest. You were a terrible patient. I still am. But you've had 5 years of practice managing me. His expression softened. Thank you, Revna, for surviving. For becoming who you are, for choosing this life, when you could have chosen safety. Safety is overrated, I replied. Besides, I learned something in that tower during all those years alone. What? That the most dangerous thing a person can do is choose to matter, to refuse to be invisible, to demand that the world acknowledge their existence. I looked at the city below, at the evidence of everything we'd built together. I chose to matter, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure every human child in this kingdom knows they can make the same choice. The wedding was held 3 months later, in the great hall of the palace, attended by nobles and commoners alike. The council had protested, as predicted. Several traditional families had boycotted the ceremony. There had been 2 assassination attempts in the weeks leading up to it. We'd survived them all. When Damien placed the crown on my head, not a queen's crown inherited through blood, but one newly forged for a new kind of ruler, I thought about Uncle Silas. Wondered if he was still alive, still gambling, still selling whatever he could for silver marks. I hoped he heard about this. Hoped he understood that the child he'd sold for 30 pieces of silver had become a queen, that the disposable niece he'd traded away now ruled over territories he'd never even seen. I hoped it hurt. But more than that, I hoped he faded into irrelevance. Because revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about making your enemies suffer. It was about making yourself matter so completely that they became footnotes in your story instead of authors of it. That night, as Damien and I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, our city now, he asked me what I was thinking. About stories, I said. About how they begin and how they end. About how we're told that fairy tales are about princesses being rescued by princes, but really they're about people saving themselves and each other in equal measure. And what's our story? He asked. I looked at my husband, my partner, my king, at the man who'd been dangerous enough to kill for his throne but gentle enough to trust a human girl with his life, at the person who'd helped me transform from victim to survivor to something more powerful than either. Ours, I said, is about 2 people who refused to accept the world as it was and decided to build something better. Who chose each other when it was politically stupid and personally dangerous. Who learned that power isn't about dominance, it's about partnership. I like that story, he murmured. Good, I replied. Because we're only at the beginning. We have a kingdom to transform, children to raise, and a legacy to build. The hardest work is still ahead. Together, always together. We stood there as night fell over Iron Peak. 2 people who'd been shaped by trauma and violence and loss, who'd found each other in the darkness, and built something that blazed like fire against the sky. The girl sold for 30 silver marks had become a queen, and her story, our story, was just beginning.